So Dave Schwartz, if you would like to introduce Dave Seibel, let me change the view.
Well, good morning. Hi there. Good to see all those punums, all those faces this morning. Just 2 or 3 quick things. David, is it possible you could tell people about, take a moment, tell them about RVN TV, what it is, how they can use it, because I'm a little foggy with that too. I want to thank Bernie Schuster, who's kind enough to tell us about RVN TV, and thus be able to get Dave on. Dave, thanks for coming. We owe you breakfast. Dave really wanted to do a live meeting like we all did, but I twisted his arm, and he's a good guy, and we appreciate your being with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Dave is an author of the best-selling book, Don't Run Out of Money, TV host, and founder and managing partner of AGS, Aurora Financial Services. Thank you for being with us. You're on.
My pleasure, guys. Glad to be here. And, again, would have loved to have done it in person. It's a lot more fun in person because I do ask a lot of questions, and actually had some books to give away to people who, could answer the questions. So, but we'll go from there. So again, I'm founder, managing partner of AGS Financial Services. My background, I'm an investment advisor, chartered financial consultant, and I don't know why this keeps changing on its own, but we'll deal with that. Wow, that's interesting. My background is I spent the beginning of my life in the corporate world, and I was a C-level executive for companies. So as I was saying, I was a C-level executive, was treasurer at Coleman Company, CFO International for Sunbeam, worked for Ron Perlman for a while, and all his, was part of the empire. So that kind of, gave me a whole other view on the financial markets and things. That's what I did. Again, the book has been great, bestseller. Get your copies on Amazon. Shameless plug. And RVN TV was kind enough to offer me a TV show back a couple years ago. And just, for you guys, RVN is a streaming service out of, I guess they were in Cherry Hill. Now they're one town over, new studios, really nice place. I guess it's Mount Laurel now. And what they do is they do TV shows for people who have, want to get their stories out, have interesting things to say, people with businesses that want to not just promote a business, but provide good information for people. So it's something, if you've ever had the desire to do a TV show or something along those lines, or even to be a guest, they're always looking for guests. I'm always looking for guests for my show. Feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me. I can steer you to the right people, or RVN TV directly. Let them know that you heard from me, and they'll give you the tour and set you up. So it's certainly worthwhile if you have a business you want to promote. If you're a business owner or a service provider or something, there's usually a show that is looking for a guest that fit that, and it's a great way to promote yourself. So go from there. So what I want to talk about today, a large part of what I do and don't run out of money is I talk about retirement planning, and not only retirement planning, because there's a million guys that do that, but kind of given my background and what I've seen in the financial world from the corporate standpoint, I take a much different approach to things. So this is where I normally ask you guys a bunch of questions. We get a little banter back and forth, but I'll just ask the questions and you can all kind of just nod along. But how many people know what the number one fear of adults, most adults, but 55 plus, relating to retirement? And this is where we'd have a little back and forth, but the answer is that running out of money. There's been a multitude of surveys that have been done by different companies and different organizations that show that the number one fear that most people have about retirement is running out of money. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And that's really what I want to go into today. Part of this presentation is really designed to give you a different way to look at things, to look at retirement, because we all have been sucked in by some of these rules of thumb and Google. Everybody's a day trader these days, until the market does what it's doing. So I should say everybody was a day trader last year when the market was going up every day, like it was, back in the dot-com days. And now, people just don't, a lot of people don't know what to do. That's a problem. And one of the things that I try to do in this presentation tries to do is just give you a different way of looking at things. So if you can come out of this with a little aha, I did my job. So another question, and this is something that really I think people need to really stop and look at, is what's the biggest difference between your last day of work and your first day of retirement? And a lot of people say, well, I got all sorts of time and I got this and I got that and I can do what I want. And, somehow for those of you that are already retired and the people I know that are retired, they say they're busier than ever and they don't have time to do anything. So haven't gotten there yet. But the answer is, where's your paycheck come from? Because one of the things that people realize is that, retirement is just the next phase of your life. So you get a paycheck your whole life. Now you're going to get a paycheck for the rest of your life. So how does that happen? So, you want a paycheck. What most people's paycheck is Social Security and a pension if you have it, right? That's the guaranteed stuff most people have. And then they've got their expenses and taxes and everything else. So for most people that I come across, they have some sort of income gap. So, and just jump around a little, but I promise it all ties in at the end. It's like one of those movies. I don't know how many of you guys remember these commercials. You guys are all probably about the right age, plus or minus my age. The guys walking around carrying their numbers, right? And it was, they said, what's your retirement number? How much money do you need for retirement? And there's a problem with that. And in the book, I go into something called the big number. And, back when people had pensions, you had your Social Security, you had pension, you had a house that was probably paid for, didn't have a lot of debt. And that was the magic. You could, people could retire. They knew how much money they had coming in. So they knew how much money they could spend. And for the most part, that led to you led the retirement that you were able to lead. But most people lived within their means at that point. Nowadays, without pensions, everything's in a 401k. Everything, it's all self-managed. So what we've gone to is we look at this, we don't worry about our income. And I refer to your income as your small number. Okay, your monthly income. That's the number you need to live the life you want to live, whatever that is. What we've started, we've kind of developed this mentality of the large number because we have money in our 401ks and our IRAs, and, they're all self-managed. So, predominantly you get two groups of people, one group that says, oh, my company's managing it. No, they're not. Or two, they try to be Warren Buffett and they trade their accounts, and that leads to other things because all they do is they look at the number and they want their big number to be bigger because nobody takes the time to say, how much of a big number do I need? And that leads to a lot of problems, as we've seen. I mean, I've honestly, I met two people last year whose retirement plan consisted of buying Bitcoin and Tesla. And that worked out really well last year until it didn't this year. So a few changes in the retirement plans. So the key point is that, we focus now because of the media, because of Google, because of, we tend to focus on the big number because that's what's there. We have to kind of change that mindset a little to start focusing on the little number. And why? This is one of these things. This is just a sample of a retirement calculator I found online, and these things are all over the place. You can find them on, every financial company has one, every bank has one, things like AARP, CNN, everybody's got one. But these are and pardon my way of putting it, but these are the stupidest things I've ever seen. And why? Because what do they do here? And this is exactly, it says, I'm 55, my income's 125,000 pre-tax, I've got 500,000 put away, and I'm saving about $1,250 a month. And from there, it puts it into the black box, mixes it around, and comes out and says, okay, you're going to have about $1.3 million when you're 67. Okay, I don't know, 67, probably full retirement age for this person. But, is that the year they're retiring? Who knows? But somehow it tells you that you're gonna need 2.7 million to retire. Now, they come up with that with a bunch of really bad assumptions, because what this doesn't ask you, this calculator, is, are you married? Doesn't ask you about Social Security, doesn't ask you about what your expenses really are. It just assumes you're going to spend a percentage of your current income you're going to be spending. So it really doesn't ask you any of the questions it really needs to know. But what it does do is it says, if you're 55 and you say, well, I could have 1.3 million. Okay, well, that sounds good. But sorry, you're going to need 2.7. What it does is it's designed to scare the hell out of you, is all it's really doing. So that whoever put this thing up, you're going to call them and say, hey, I need help. Well, that's a bit of a problem. And one of the reasons is, and this is probably one of the key takeaways, is that, buying a boat is a goal. Retirement isn't a goal. It's just the next phase of your life. But we treat it like this big goal, like we're buying a boat or going on a big vacation where we got to save a bunch of money for what's going to happen on a given day or one expense that we want. But that goes back to the retirement paycheck. You don't need a lump sum of money. You need to try to figure out how you're going to pay yourself for however long you're going to be around. So if all you have is a big number, again, a big account balance, how are you going to pay your bills each month? Now, you guys, I don't know how many of you heard of something called the 4% rule. It may, if you guys use advisors, a lot of advisors use this, and I have no idea why. And I'm going to show you in a minute how dangerous using this kind of methodology is. And really using one thing, let me just explain. The 4% rule basically says, for those of you that don't know, that says that if you took your big number, right, your account balances, and you added them all up, and you took and you kept them, if you were strict to the 4% rule, the guy that wrote it back in, I believe it was the 80s, it said that you'd have 50% in bonds and 50% in the S&P. And if you did that, and you took out 4% the first year, and then you just adjusted that 4% for inflation every year, you'd never run out of money. Well, there's a million and one problems with that. One of the biggest is, which I'm going to get into in a minute, we'll talk about risk. But the problem is that these rules of thumb, especially this one, was done back in the 80s when bond yields were north of 6-7%. And, the S&P over any 20-year period is always going to give you 9%. Okay. So sure, if you're only taking out 4% and everything you own is getting better than 4%, theoretically, you won't run out of money. The problem with that is that it's not necessarily true, because sometimes math doesn't work the way you think it is. And one of the key things is that the market, as we'll see in a minute, doesn't give you average returns. So let's jump into risk for a second. And, when I talk about risk, and this is one, we always have a good conversation when I'm doing this one live, is about what is risk and what do you think? When I talk about risk, we're talking about the financial markets, your retirement and everything else. What is risk? And probably 99.99% of the times, because there was one person who gave me a different answer, but 99.99% of the time, they'll talk about something along the lines of market risk. Okay. Well, that's what people look at for risk. Well, how much money can I lose? Well, it depends, right? What are you in, right? If you're in the market, you could lose. If you're in, but if you're in a savings account, well, you really can't lose money, can you? And I know most of you know that the answer is sure you can, especially when inflation's running at 8-9% and you've got money in a 2%, earning 2%. Well, you're losing money. But when we get into risk, how do we manage risk? And one of the things we start with, and it's the one thing as an investment advisor, one of the first things I have to ask people, and certainly ask them before we invest any money, is what's your risk tolerance, right? Risk tolerance is actually the dumbest concept known to the investment community. Because what is risk tolerance? Risk tolerance is, well, how do you feel, right? It really doesn't mean anything except, from my perspective, if I'm going to manage money for somebody and they say that they're conservative or they're aggressive, well, we have to design a portfolio that matches that risk tolerance. But there's a problem with that because, first of all, risk tolerance, there's no quantitative measure of risk tolerance, even though there's some people that would like to tell you that there is. There's no scale. You have conservative, conservative, moderate, moderately aggressive, and aggressive. And, some people put that on a 1 to 6, but there's no way for me to sit there and run you through something that says you are a risk, your risk level is 87 or 32 or anything else. What's more important than risk tolerance? Well, what about your risk capacity? That means how much risk can you actually take? Okay, if you're a 25-year-old, well, you can take a lot of risk because you can handle the ups and downs because you're not using this money, this retirement money, for another, 40, 50 years, right? So you can take a lot of risk. However, if you're 65 and you're getting ready to retire and maybe you've got a transaction coming up where you're buying, selling a house, well, you may not have a very high risk capacity. You may not be able to take a lot of risk because a bad market like we're seeing now may have just a horrendous effect on your retirement. So risk capacity, and the other big number is the risk needed. What I mean by that is in technical terms, it's the effective return of your portfolio that you need. How much do you need to make in your portfolio to achieve your goals? And this is one thing I see now is when everybody's kind of, basically taking a lot of risk because they're managing their own stuff. So what happens is they end up taking way more risk than they need to. You have people, one of the things I always say is that, people who are in good shape is when you've already won the game, stop playing. Yet these are people I see all time and time again that are putting big money into things that are high risk. When I look at their situation and say, well, you need a very conservative portfolio. Not that you want to be in that, but you could get away with being very conservative and still being very successful and meeting all of what your definition of success in retirement. So we want to get off the risk tolerance and look at more, again, when we're doing this, look at more of the things that actually matter, risk capacity and how much risk you need to take. So we talk about risk. There's really 3 risks that people tend to not look at or not give a lot of thought to because it's not sexy, right? It's not the market. Number 1, inflation, longevity, and we're going to get into those a little more in a second. The third one I want to talk about first is something called sequence of returns. And what sequence of returns is just that the market doesn't return the average every year. It goes up and down as we see this year. So kind of bringing it all together, when you look at something like the 4% rule, which says that here's what you do every year. You do, just take out 4% plus inflation and you'll be fine. Well, let's look at an example of that and show you why it doesn't really work and could cause problems. And we may have some people here today that have this problem right now, don't even know it. So this is an example that I laid out in the book, and nobody in particular. It's just a math problem basically. But you have the Jones family and the Smith family, very creative, I know. The Jones family retired at the beginning of 1995, and the Smith family at the beginning of 2000. They both, at retirement, had $500,000, and it was invested in the S&P, and they withdrew $25,000 a year and increased it each year for inflation. Okay? So basically, they're doing the same thing, exactly the same thing. They're just doing it 5 years apart. Okay? Well, the Jones family, as you can see in 2018, had about $1.8 million in their account. And the Smith family, who did exactly the same thing, was broke. Okay? Now, the question is why? And this is where I always offer a free book to the person that comes up with the right answer. So I don't know if we have the chat up if somebody wants to pop it in, but, you know, this is sequence of returns at work. The answer is the Jones family retired at the beginning of the dot-com boom. Their first 5 years was phenomenal, right? We remember what happened in the market from 95 to 2000. The Smiths retired in 2000. Their first 3 or 4 years weren't so great. So they lost money. They're taking out the same amount, but they lost money from the get-go. And what sequence of return says is basically the first 5 years matters the most in your retirement. Okay, so just a cautionary tale: if somebody retired at the beginning of this year, and they're taking their method of funding their retirement is taking money out of their accounts every month, then you really need to stop and look at it, because you're not going to know you had a problem until you really have a problem. Because what happens is, in the case of the Smith family, they had bad first 5 years, then they kind of went along, still had a decent amount of money. But then what happened is the next shoe dropped in 2008. And then finally what happens is you're just taking so much money out of your accounts that even the good years between 2000, let's say 9 and 2021, even that incredible run that we had wasn't enough to get them back to where they could survive, and they ran out of money. And the thing is, once you're out of money, you're out of money. You know, once your accounts go to zero, your accounts are at zero, and there's really no coming back from that. And then you have to hope that, you know, Social Security and maybe a small pension covers you.
What about those other two risks? We all certainly know what inflation.
Oh, wait a minute. So how did that happen? Somehow it was recorded. So what about the other two risks? We talk about inflation. Honestly, you know, 2 years ago when I would do this presentation, I'd have to explain inflation because people hadn't seen it in such a long time. Now I think it goes without saying that, you know, the bag of groceries 10 years ago costs a lot more today. So obviously inflation is something we need to take into account. The other one is longevity. And this is the one that is funny, because I know a lot of advisors do, you know, when they do a financial plan for people, they run it out to life expectancy. Like that's some magical number. And they'll sit there and they'll say, well, you know, your plan has an 85% probability of success through longevity. Through your life expectancy. But what does that really mean if you turn it around? It means that your plan has a less than 100% chance of being successful, however you define it, through an age that by definition, 50% of you are going to live longer than, because that's what life expectancy is. Longevity risk basically says that, hey, we don't, last time I checked, we don't come with an expiration date stamped on the back of our necks. So we can't plan for an end date. We're living longer. People are healthier. We need to build plans that take it out. I take all plans out to, you know, at least 109 years old. And everybody says, well, I don't want to live that long. That's fine. I don't care if you want to live that long or if you will live that long. But I want to make sure that if you are still around, that you've got money. You quick story. My father passed away last year at the age of 93. And at his funeral, we didn't want anybody there. They didn't want anybody that didn't know them speaking. So it was just family and friends. And I got up, to say something. I looked around and everybody looked like they were at a funeral because they were. And I said to everybody, I said, okay, listen, I see everybody with the long faces, but everybody here, with the exception of the grandkids, knew my father for at least 30, 40, some 50 years or longer. And I looked at him, I said, okay, if we were sitting here 30 years ago, how many of you would have bet the over? And that was it. Everybody looked at my father. Nobody would have bet that my father would have been around past maybe 75. That would have probably been the number that anybody would have bet on. But he to 93, and he had a great 93. Well, he had a great 92 and a half years. The last 6 months were probably not that good, but, and it was great. But because we had planned for that, he was fine. Now, his wife, my stepmother, just passed away at the age of 96. So that'll tell you the need. There's all sorts of statistics out there that'll tell you, you know what, if you're 65 today and you're relatively healthy, there's a good chance, and married, there's a good chance that one of you or your spouse is going to live well into your 90s. So we need to plan for that.
What about those other two?
I don't know.
To get around these problems.
Why is it recording? That is weird. So real quick, one of the things, and this guy with the look on his face, is that, the modern method, right, of financial planning is that, there's all these rules out there, like if you're following the 4% rule, what do you do if the market's down? Well, they'll tell you, well, you can adjust something like, well, I spend less money next year. Really? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to spend your retirement, being a cash manager, an investment manager, and an economist, trying to figure out what's going to happen so that you can figure out how to pay your bills? I don't think that's fair. And I think that even if you could do that, that may work in your 60s. But are you going to be able to do that financial gymnastics when you're in your 90s or 80s? And who wants to do that? So I think that one of the big things that the current environment does, because it allows us to do everything ourselves, is that it kind of makes it seem like it's a good idea. And what I want people to really stop and look at is, okay, maybe something makes sense today because I'm retired and I want to sit here and I want to play the market. And I want to do all this and I don't know why, but that's what they want to do. Does that same method work 10 years or 15 or 20 years down the road? So, question. Do each one of you have a plan that's going to enable you to live the retirement you imagine without the fear of running out of money? And when I say plan, see if these slides are in order, a portfolio or a financial product by itself is not a financial plan. Because I'll tell you how many I always ask when I have somebody new in my office and we're sitting down to talk about their stuff, one of the first things I do is ask them if they have a financial plan and if I could take a look at it. And I'm surprised that most people don't have a financial plan, but even those that say they do, a large number of them actually, when I say, can I review it, they hand me an account statement of some sort. Okay. Now, when I talk about a financial plan, I'm talking about a roadmap. I'm talking about something, a document on paper that lays out in detail how you're going to pay your bills from now until the end, with milestones and benchmarks and everything else. So it's actually something, it's not I don't know how many of you guys might have one of these. I know there's still a lot of them out there. But, if you have one of these leather binders that some guy put together for you that has 100 pages in it with your name embossed in gold down there and it's sitting on your shelf collecting dust, that's not a financial plan. That's a sales tool to get you to buy more insurance. So what I want to show you real quick is the way we have I've created a proprietary system. It's called the year one analysis. The whole point of this is just to show you, we saw the black box, right? You put in a couple numbers and presto changeo, you get a little bit of information there you get a financial plan that tells you need $3 million to retire. Well, how should you really be doing it? Well, just in a nutshell, in order to really come up with a plan, you got to do the work. And, it is a bit of work on the front end. And surprisingly, I get a lot of people who just don't want to do the work. But how do you do it? So we start with today, because the only thing that we can know with 100% certainty is today. So what's your income, your expenses, your assets, your liabilities today? And then what we do is we can take those and we can, project those forward. We always go to the first day of, to your last day of work, your first day of retirement. That's why we call it the year one analysis. It's your year one. That's our kind of interim goal, is to come up with your number, your year one of retirement. How much money do you need from an income standpoint? Okay. This isn't a big number analysis. It's not there to say, oh, you need 2 million or 5 million or 200,000 or whatever. It's there to say, how much money do I need each month to pay my bills? How much of a paycheck do I need? So we take today's cash flow, we project it forward, right? So we'll project it forward using, conservative assumptions for inflation and rate of return. So always use higher inflation and lower rates of return. We put in any changes, the things, some of you may have kids going to college, some of you may want to, buy a vacation, or a second house or a retirement house, or you have weddings, whatever it is that you have, we're going to put all that stuff in and we're going to project it forward. Okay. And that's going to be the best way we can get you to what that small number is, your first year of retirement. And then we're going to do the same thing out as far as we can go. So each year we can project. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's really we found we always come up with conservative numbers. We always find that people, when they get into retirement, are spending less than they've projected. Thankfully, some of that does have to do over the last few years with COVID. People aren't traveling and things. But even as we're coming out of it, we are still seeing that people are a little more conservative than they think they are. But we want to project this so that we can build your first, it really comes down to your retirement paycheck. Okay. Now, there's two other things. Another part of this is really about defining success, and how do you define success? And, that's up to you. What kind of retirement do you want? So we really look at two things. We look at lifestyle goals, and we look at the big audacious goals that I always force people to think about. They always say, your lifestyle goal is basically, where are you going to be living? Are you staying in New Jersey? Or are you moving to Florida or the Carolinas or somewhere else? Are you going to downsize your house? Are you going to travel a lot? What is it that you want to do? We want that built in. We don't want it to be, some sort of mystery later on. The other thing is the audacious goal that everybody has, but nobody talks about. And what we find is that even husband and wives don't talk about these things, right? You may have one. I've got clients that, and we just executed this. These are some of my earliest clients that I had, that we've been planning with, and they wanted to buy a winery when they retired. And we had, they never thought it was possible. We had worked the numbers and we figured out a way to make it happen. We've had people that have wanted, for the audacious goal was buying a house at the beach, or a couple that they signed up, and they're doing this starting next year, is they signed up for one of these round the world trips, which sound pretty cool. You can basically, it's like a pass, you just get on and get off anytime you want, and you go everywhere. It's really kind of cool and expensive, but we were able to plan for that. Not all goals are achievable, but one thing we know is that if you don't plan for it, it'll never happen. So once again, looking at things, and if there's one thing I can get you to do is to look at your retirement a little differently. Look at it not in terms of a big number, not in terms of, oh, I've got, so much money, because I'll be honest with you, having that big number doesn't really mean anything. Some of my clients that have one client in particular who has actually the biggest number that I have, of my clients, I think is we're struggling. These people who have multiple millions of dollars, and we're struggling to figure out how they're going to be successful in retirement, just because the amount of money that these people spend. Okay. Then I have people who, never made a lot of money. They got, 3, 4, 500,000 maybe in all the retirement accounts, but they live within their means. They got some money in the bank, and, they don't have any debt. And that's the trifecta as far as I'm concerned when it comes to retirement. And these people have a lot less money, but I think they're gonna have everything that they want in retirement. So again, how do we fill that gap that comes from your retirement paycheck? And this is another one of those things where it's just a different way of thinking. So when you have, we all look at money, and it seems like we all look at it the same way, but really money, and a lot of the investment guys want you to think of it that way. You need your money to do 4 things in retirement, or really any time, right? You need income, you need liquidity, you need protection, and that can mean a lot of different things to different people, right? That could mean anything from insurance to, making sure that you don't run out of money, your paycheck, everything. And obviously you need growth, right? So you need, this is where you got to realize that there is no one financial product or group of products that will do all these. And every advisor that I've ever spoken to, they seem to have one thing for you that's gonna do everything. Whether it's, put your money in this portfolio, it's gonna give you everything, or buy this financial product, buy this annuity or something else, and put all your money in there, and that's gonna do everything for you. The answer is, what I like to do is I like to get, ask people to just take a step back in a moment of clarity and think about it. And anytime you do that, you'll say, yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. So the answer is you really need all of those, right? You're going to need your growth assets, your portfolio assets. You're going to need your protection assets. You're going to need liquidity. Liquidity is money in the bank, right? And this is where you get, like, some guys say, oh, keep that money in the market because it'll grow. But what happens this year if you needed 20 grand to, put in a new HVA system in your house, and that $20,000, because you had it in the market, just cost you 20% more, right? Something about having money in the bank that lets you sleep at night. But again, how much? Well, that's part of the planning process. So one of the things that I talk about, I love income. I mean, I want, there's a lot of things out there that can produce income to fill that gap, right? You got your Social Security, you got maybe a pension, and you're going to have that income gap. How do we fill that income gap? Because if we have instruments that will fill that gap on a close to guaranteed basis, then we got our paycheck, right? But the problem is that these are the things that are either most people don't understand, bonds, or, even dividend paying stocks, a good portfolio of dividend payers, things like annuities and stuff like that give you guaranteed income. One of the problems with these is that they're complicated. Okay. A bond fund doesn't do the same thing as a portfolio of bonds. Okay. Very, very different. So, you don't want to be in a bond mutual fund, but most people are. That's where they get their diversification, they call it. Finding out this year that doesn't really work. But, if you had a portfolio of bonds, even though the price, it looks like you're losing money on paper, you're still getting your income, right? And you're going to get that, as long as you hold that to maturity, you're going to get that. The problem with these instruments is that they are more complicated than just the normal stuff. Most people don't understand them, okay? And probably the biggest thing is they're boring. And that's the thing. My philosophy is, when it comes to my retirement paycheck, and obviously I'm not there, I know some of you are, I like boring. I want my clients to be the most boring person at the cocktail party. So when everybody's sitting there talking about their, how much money they made in Bitcoin and Tesla, I want my clients sitting there in a corner chuckling, because they know what's going to happen, what the follow-up to that's going to be next year at the Christmas party, like this year, when they're all hanging their head. And yeah, I give you personal experience from people I know who, started last year with a $200,000 portfolio in Tesla and really Tesla and Bitcoin, maybe a couple other things like Apple, rode that 200,000 up to 600,000 and thought they were a genius. When I told them, hey, maybe you want to take some of that off the table. No, these are great things. They're going up forever. And now that 200,000 that they started with is now worth about 150,000. So boring, I think, is good. And I think that's something that we need to get back to. When we had pensions and just Social Security and pensions and houses that were paid for, that was boring. But, to me, that's good. So basically, if you thought about it, you could create your own personal pension and, using some of these boring instruments. And all you're doing is taking some of your growth assets, right? Take some money out of the portfolio and put it into protection and income assets, right? Think about it. If the easiest way to look at it is people that want a legacy, they want to leave a lot of money, or they want to leave money to their kids, right? And some people identify a number, and they don't spend any money because they want to leave money. And this is very, there's a lot of groups of people that a lot of cultures that this is a thing that you do. Listen, I know my grandparents were like that. They didn't spend a penny, and it was to pass it all on, right? Well, there's ways to do that. Well, the easiest way to do that is we always look at people, why don't you just buy a life insurance policy, spend some of your money, protect your legacy, right? Spend some of your money, create your income, so then that the rest of your assets that are left can just sit there and grow, because you've got that other stuff locked up. And this is where the planning comes in, right? So if you could guarantee all the things you want to guarantee and still have some money sitting over here in the market, let's call it, because that's where everybody wants to be. But now I don't need that money for anything. I don't care if the market goes up or down, because we know it's going to go up or down. But now, even as a retiree, where you have a very short time horizon, we've now pushed that time horizon out 20 years, because we don't need that money to do anything more than maybe some inflation protection, because everything else has been planned for and spoken for. So in this case, again, we've used some of those things and we've created this income stream. So instead of having that gap, whatever it was, $21,000 gap, we now have a $3,000 positive on your monthly income. The point is that these things are doable. It's just not what it's not the way most people think, right? Most individuals think about the market, and most advisors think about making money and putting you in products that they sell that will make them money, whether it's portfolios, I love the guys that just have all their money sitting in mutual funds because they think it's free. And they don't realize that these mutual funds are costing them somewhere between 3% and 5%. They just have no idea because they don't see it. Okay. It's a different way of thinking. And this is kind of like my mission, is to get more people just to think differently, because then we'd have less people in situations where they're running out of money, because all of a sudden, we have short memories. We forget Black Monday. We forget the .com crash. We forget 2008, even though all those things were horrific from a financial standpoint, and people were, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. Hopefully we've seen the bottom of this move. Who knows? But, everybody's saying the same thing. This is horrific. We keep repeating the same things, and it's really a game of chance that people are, because we keep doing things the same way, because we keep, praying at the altar of the stock market with everything, right? And I'm not a market hater. We manage a lot of assets for people, but what we want is we want people to understand that, rate of return, your investments, your portfolio, your financial products, all it is a means to an end. And that's the important part, is saying it's not about the assets. It's not about the market. It's not about owning, Meta or Google or Alphabet or Amazon or Apple or Tesla or Bitcoin or having any of these things. Okay. It's about being successful in retirement. So you guys, your family, your wife, whatever, you guys can live the retirement that you want without worrying about it. So the question becomes, like, we all have a plan in mind, right? We all think we know. Everybody does. We do this every day. We think we know. We think, we have a plan. But if that plan that you believe to be true turned out not to be true, when would you want to know? And that's the key. So if there's one thing I could tell you is it's work. It's a different way of thinking, but it is absolutely probably the best time and energy you will spend in your life to go through this type of process with, an advisor, somebody who, knows what they're doing and has a process, not trying to just sell you something, so that you could go through the work and have that document to say, okay, we know how we are going to fund our retirement, how we're going to get our money every month without the hassles. And that's basically it. Shameless plug. Anybody that wants to, obviously, if anybody wants to give us a call, I'm sure we'll get all our information out to you. And I have to show you these things because if I don't, I get in trouble, especially because this is being recorded. So that's what I got for you. It's kind of abbreviated, not as much fun as doing it in person, because we do have a lot of fun when we do that. But I guess at this point, we can open it up if anybody's got any questions.
May I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had thought that by buying these long-term bonds, I was going to be safe in terms of my investments. And I put, you think about the safe part of your portfolio as being bonds, the fixed income, and the risky part is the stocks. But the bonds that I have plummeted in value, market value. And I know the long-term, I bought the long-term bonds because they were giving a higher yield. Everything is inverted now. But is there a safe place to put money long-term wise that won't plummet if interest rates continue to go up?
Okay, well, one of the key things there is, and obviously just disclaimer, it's hard for me to give individual advice on what's good. Yeah, there are things that you could do. However, I think what's more important is you understand and people understand how the bonds work, right? So this is one of the things that I do every time I do a quarterly review this year. I always show I have a document that a little page that I use, which is provided by one of our bond managers. So the way you have to think about it is the loss that you're seeing in your bonds is strictly a paper loss, right? Same thing as if you sold, if you had a bunch of stocks, obviously you don't realize that loss until they're sold. But the difference with the bonds is when you bought that bond, you bought it at either a premium or a discount to par, right? If you hold that bond to maturity, which I would imagine is what you planned on doing, right? You planned on getting a stream of income over time. When that bond matures, you're going to get par back. So you're going to get your money back, basically, plus or minus whatever the discount or premium was when you bought it. And you're going to get that stream of income over time. So you need to, this is another one of those things you need to look at a little differently. Even though the price of the bonds has changed, right? The price, interest rates go up, bond prices go down, right? Because who wants an old bond when you can buy a new one at a higher rate? But you haven't lost any money. You're still getting that same stream of income, and you're still getting the exact same cash flow and money back that you were when interest rates were much lower, right? So nothing on those bonds that you own has changed. It's all just paper. So from a bond portfolio perspective, I always tell people, listen, this part of your portfolio, this is what you did. You signed up for these cash flows. You're still going to get them. That hasn't changed. It just looks ugly. It really does. So I wouldn't, right now, without really going through what you have and looking at it and everything else, I would say don't worry about that one piece. Absolutely don't worry about it, because you're still getting exactly what you signed up for when you bought the bonds.
Thank you.
Hope that helps you.
Thanks.
Anybody else got anything to say? Questions, comments?
Yeah, we've got some hands raised.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, just a weird question. You know, there are many advisors out there, and the way they charge, the way they give a fee is often based on a percentage, as if it takes more work to manage $5 million versus $3 million. And I just wanted to know your take on how a fair system of charging a client is.
Well, you know what? It depends. And this is probably one of the biggest discussions going on inside the business at this point. First of all, I don't think that if an advisor is charging the same fee for somebody that has, you know, $1 million and $2 million and $5 million and everything else, well, that's kind of a problem, because you're right. And I know, I do know guys that charge a flat fee, 1%, 1.5%, you know, regardless of how much money. I mean, we use a sliding scale. I also don't charge for other things. When I have a client, I don't charge an asset management fee and then charge a financial planning fee and then charge a consulting fee. You know, basically the only thing will be the asset management fee. So that basically covers the relationship, because I don't want to sit there and say, okay, well, you need your financial plan updated. That'll be, let's see, you have $5 million. So that'll cost you, you know, $5,000 a year in addition. One of the things I will say is that I think the fee, now some fees are exorbitant. There are absolutely some advisors that just charge ridiculous fees. And that, I think, is absolutely wrong, and people should look at them. And like you're saying, yeah, it doesn't cost you any more to manage 3 or 5 or whatever. One of the things I will say is that when you compare it, you need to look at it almost from a value perspective. Okay. If you were doing something different, again, I used the example in the presentation about mutual funds, and people look at, and this is one of the hardest things I have to explain to people, is when they begin to work with me, you see every fee. Everything's transparent, right? There's nothing hidden. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what I'm paying. Yet if you went to, you know, I love the people that say, oh, I'll just invest with Vanguard. Really? Okay. Well, Vanguard's supposed to, they hang their hat on the fact that they're cheap. But they're also, if you look at Vanguard funds, they're also never in the top performing funds. And there's a reason, because they're not all that cheap. In mutual funds, you don't see most of the stuff you're paying for. It's not in the fees that are reported. Okay. Go try to find out how much your mutual fund is paying in transaction fees. You can't. There's a lot of other fees. Average mutual funds, equity mutual funds, especially when you get into small cap or international, things like that we all have, or I don't, but a lot of people do. You could be paying 3 to 5% and not even know it. So it's important. I understand what you're saying, and there are a lot of advisors out there that are, well, I won't use the word I'm thinking, but they charge exorbitant fees. I think fees should be something discussed between the clients, and it should be something that the client, regardless of whether they have, 250,000 or 25 million, that they see the value in that fee. And if they don't, then you're absolutely right. You shouldn't be paying it. So hopefully that answered your question. There are a lot of talks now going on about, other ways to do it. I don't find I hate nickel and diming. So I don't want to go to a client and say, okay, you called me because you wanted to know whether, you should pay off your mortgage or do something else with the money that you're sitting on. And I don't want to be like the old New York City cab driver and turn the meter on, or an attorney or something. And okay, you called me to ask me a simple question, and I'm going to send you a bill for, an hour worth of consulting time. All that does is get people not to call you. So you end up with a worse answer. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Fine, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure thing.
First of all, I loved your answer to Victor about the bonds. I actually have been using that logic for many years. It doesn't matter. I'm in for the long haul on bonds. And Victor, it's working for me.
Yep.
I just take the income and I'll pass those bonds on to my heirs.
Yeah.
I'll never live to see the end of most of them, and that's fine with me.
Yeah.
My question, though, is in all your analysis and calculations of what is needed for retirement, for the record, I'm 64. I'm working part-time in a family business yet. My son has taken over most of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm still on the payroll. Probably within a couple of years, I will not be.
Sure.
So I'm looking ahead a little bit. But basically, the question is, in all your analysis here in your charts, is it reasonable to make the assumption that the passive income, meaning bond interest and dividends and all that, should be calculated at, say, the current levels that they are going forward, say another decade or two? Things do change in the market. Dividends get cut here and there, and interest rates go up and down. Or should one discount that somewhat to be conservative in financial planning?
My answer is, and the way I always put it to clients is, I build so much fluff into plans. I'm going to put higher expenses in there. When you look at the way the expenses inflate and things, we know it's not reasonable, but I want to be overly conservative, because the way I look at it is, if I'm overly conservative in a plan and I'm using overly conservative assumptions, okay, so by that I always mean higher inflation, lower rates of return, and your plan works, let's say, well, then I know it's going to work under just about every scenario, right? So when we run plans, we'll do the first that do the longevity analysis, what I call it. So this is like, okay, you and, if you're married, you and your wife, you both live out to 109 years old, and, where are you at 109? Okay. Or when does the money technically run out? And, a lot of times, even when the money runs out, there's still money, because you still got Social Security, you'd have all this income coming in. But, that just tells us when the account balances run out. Well, if we can be really conservative, the first thing I'm going to do is, when we come up with a plan, is try to break it. So if we're conservative and it works, how bad do things have to get? We're already assuming they're not as good as you think they are, right? They're not as good as they are. And how bad do things have to get before you have a problem? So to answer your question, absolutely be as conservative as you can. You know, that's where I would want to know, how bad do things have to be from a you know, return standpoint on all your assets before things don't work. And then when you see that number, is that realistic? And then the other thing is, well, how do you protect against that piece, right? So are there some other assets that you could move some of this into, right? Again, we you know, you said it, I'll take these bonds and I'll hand them off to the kids, right? Or to the next generation. But, you know, maybe there's some stuff that you can do that says, you know what, I'm going to take a piece of that and make sure I'm protecting my wife and I, so that we know the rest of it. And yeah, that may go away with us, maybe not, who knows, but we know then more is going to end up passing later on. So again, sometimes it's just looking at different things, looking at more instruments and just moving things around, but using, you know, I think you've got the right idea there. Just, yeah, be conservative as you can.
All right, thanks. Don't get me wrong. Our goal is to spend our last penny the day we die. The problem is we don't know what day that will be.
Exactly. Well, the answer there is you get to spend what you want to spend. And then, you know, the kids are sitting there, you know, kind of, you know, ticking down and saying, geez, would you guys go already? We want something when you go.
We're very fortunate. Our kids don't need it, but it's still, if it's there, they're going to get it. And they're very happy. It's fine, whatever. But we're very fortunate that way. So we're just spending our money.
Right. Oh, and that's perfect. And again, you know, that's really why we do what we do, because, you know, we want people to spend their money. We just feel that when things are allocated properly, and sometimes it's just looking at things differently, you find out that you can actually spend more money because you've just done some reallocations, take the pressure off of years like this, knowing that, you know, at 64, this isn't the last bad market you're going to see, right?
Right.
And they get scarier. You know, everybody on this, probably everybody on the call here, I would assume, you know, went through 2008 and said, you know, we got plenty of time, right? Well, now, you know, 2022, maybe not as much time. And next time, you know, maybe in retirement, and it gets a little scarier. So this is where some of that, you know, guaranteed income and stuff that we don't even have to worry about the market. It's going to do what it does. You know, I always say that about dividends. You know, dividends are great, you know, in a portfolio, not one or two stocks that pay decent dividends now. But, you know, it's great. But, you know, if the market tanks, you can have great dividend yielding stocks, but, you know, a good yield of a small number is still a small number. So, but yeah, spend your money. That's a great, you know, plan for it and spend it.
Thanks. It's been very helpful today.
Sure.
Ed, Alan, you both have your hands raised.
What's that?
We've got a couple of hands raised still. Alan, Ed.
Yeah, I'll grab it. I was wondering about bond ladders at this point in the interest rate market. For those of us who had bond ladders 10 years ago and kind of let them run down a little bit and the bonds matured and weren't reinvested, and looking at the interest rates that were available over the last 5 or 6 years, is it time to start building bond ladders again?
You know, in absence of anything else, yes. I mean, I think that, you know, again, this is where, you know, you look at the planning and you look at the, you know, remember we talked about that risk needed, right? And the risk needed will tell me, you know, if somebody has a risk needed of only, you know, 3-4%, and right now yields are out at a point where you can lock that 3 or 4% or even more up, absolutely. But I think that's probably the biggest message, guys, is that, you know, everybody wants to talk about, should I do this? Should I do that? It's a good time for bond ladders. It's a good time for this. You know, should we be buying the market now? Whatever it is. What I would really implore you guys to do is focus at it from the other side, because then the answers become obvious, right? If you knew your cash flows, you knew what rates, you know, what that rate was, then, and you could guarantee yourself by going out and buying some bonds and by whatever strategy you do, and say, okay, I can guarantee a 4% cash flow, and that guarantees my paycheck. What's better than that? Then it answers the question. So yeah, maybe a 6% cash flow is better than a 4%, but if all you need is 4%, you can lock that in, then that's a great way to go. Very, you know, I love laddering strategies, just because I think if you're going to buy bonds, you buy bonds, you hold them to maturity, you don't play with them. They, you know, you don't worry about the market value. And, you know, if you really want to play, you know, or get creative, you just adjust your duration in the portfolio. Right now, most of the bond managers that we use have a very short duration, but are starting to increase it now that the yields are increasing. And I think that's, you know, pretty much what people should be looking at. Also helps to have a good bond manager too, because bonds are one of those things that good bond managers could make you a lot of money. Hope that helped.
Thanks.
And you're up. You have to unmute, Alan.
Okay. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
You know, for a lot of people, I think their homes are the greatest asset that they have going into retirement. And, you know, it's been a while since I've seen those commercials on TV about reverse mortgages, where they get well-known actors like Robert Wagner and Fred Thompson talk about the virtues of all of it. But I'd like to know, what is your opinion? Are they a good thing or are they a bad thing?
You know, again, that's where the disclaimer comes in. You know, can't talk about individual things, yada, yada, yada. But what I can tell you about reverse mortgages is the rules on them have changed, okay? They used to be a nightmare, okay? It used to be that people, it was just, you know, you got all this money, there was nothing left in the house, the kids didn't know about it, you know, so the kids are looking to inherit the house when the parents die, and they find out that, guess what? You don't get anything. Even in situations where there wasn't that much money taken out of the house. The rules have changed quite a bit to make them not as predatory as they used to be. I do know a few people that do have reverse mortgages, and the newer ones, while expensive, do provide a decent amount of income. However, they don't provide they're not giving you the amounts that they used to. So there's much less available to borrow using the new calculations. I tend to look at reverse mortgage as the funding of last resort. Just because I think there's probably better ways. But for some people, yeah, they got a ton of money in their house and they want to stay in the house and they don't have other money. And it may be the only way to do it. So what I would recommend is just really research. If you're thinking about it, really research it. Because there are costs to go in, there's a lot of costs to get into this. So you really want to be careful with them.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Mike?
Yes. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about a certain percentage of a portfolio to be precious metals?
Depends how you do it. You know, again, talk about commercials, right? These guys that do, I forget who it was. I think it was some of the same guys that do the reverse mortgage commercials were the guys doing the precious metal commercials. Not a big fan of, you know, owning physical gold and all that stuff in IRAs. I'll just give you an example. My stepfather, you know, big, you know, he bought into that big time. When he passed away, we got into it, and he had $200 and something thousand worth of silver. The only problem was that he paid $380,000 for it. Okay, hugely expensive. As we're seeing now, gold, I mean, gold should be doing phenomenally now, and it's really not. I mean, it's supposed to be the biggest hedge against inflation, all that kind of stuff. The problem with owning physical gold or owning precious metals is that they don't pay a dividend. They're just a return. You know, having you know, 10% of a portfolio, and we max it at that in, you know, some sort of alternatives is a good thing, usually, if you know what you're doing. We've done very well with some commodity portfolios this year where we have some managers that manage commodities. I think commodities on a whole are awful. I was in that business for a long time. You talk about the Wild West. Commodity trading advisors rarely make money except when inflation hits. Okay. So we were able to swing, you know, 10% of portfolios into these type of things. And, you know, they're up, market's down, and these things are up 25% this year. So it takes a little bit of the edge off. But most years, probably not going to, it's just going to be a dead asset, honestly. You know, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, but it doesn't pay you anything. So, you know, but I wouldn't put too much in it. You know, again, I would limit, and we have a rule that we don't ever put more than 10% in any alternative investment.
Bob, see your hand?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I mean, this is a really good primer on financial management. When you were talking about bonds, you were talking about duration.
Yes.
Could you just explain that a little bit more? Because there are usually, I deal a lot with bonds, and there are two dates that you have to always consider. So if you could explain duration a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the simple explanation of duration, because we can get into calculations and stuff, and I can whip out the whiteboard, but that doesn't help. Basically, duration, if you look at it as the average maturity of your portfolio in very simple terms. So what you take your bond portfolio and how you know, something that maybe has a 5-year duration in the portfolio means that you're basically averaging about, your maturities will average about 5 years. You may have some longer and some shorter, but it's going to be about a 5-year average maturity, so that you know how much of your portfolio is maturing over that period of time. That's where you're going to be, right? So obviously, when rates are low, you want to be more on, you know, well, I'm sorry, when rates are increasing, right, you're going to be increasing the duration, and the duration goes in and out. And that's what bond managers do. It's hard for individuals to do that because individuals don't have the ability to actually get deals on bonds like a good bond manager will. So that I hope that answers your question. That's really the simple explanation of duration.
No, that's fine. I just, many people when they buy bonds don't look at the call dates on bonds, and a lot of bonds have call dates, and that changes your duration dramatically.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Larry? Larry, you have to unmute.
There we go. Hi. I'd like you to expand on the answer you gave to the question about commodities in the realm of talking about other alternative investments that you do like to recommend for your clients, and why.
Well, hey, I don't like to recommend alternative investments. Pretty much we'll use them when, like this year, when we have some access to some commodity advisors who run, and this is actually one of the few places where we use mutual funds. There's a few managers that have commodity mutual funds that they manage that we will get into. I'm not a fan of certainly things like non-traded REITs, right? Real estate investment trusts, private investments, limited partnerships, MLPs, all that kind of stuff. Not a fan.
Hedge funds also you avoid?
Well, I'll tell you, I used to manage a hedge fund. I ran a currency hedge fund for too many years that it was the worst time of my life. Made a lot of money, but again, anytime you're in something and why, I guess I have to ask the question, and this is something I always put to people, is why do you do what you do? Like, why put your money in a hedge fund? Okay. And there's a lot of different answers to that. I don't know why you would, but I'm not a fan, in all honesty, of any investment that can't be bought or sold by anything more complicated than a click of a mouse. Hedge funds tend to be, some of these things tend to be very expensive, very risky, and hard to get liquidity out of. They're also very hard to understand. Most people don't, you have a hedge fund, that can mean a million different things. I think one of the most important things that people can do, and one of the things that we insist on when we do something, even something like an annuity, is to make sure that people understand exactly what they have. And one of the problems I find with alternative investments is people get sold things because they sound sexy, somebody talks them up, whatever it is. But then it goes bad, they can't get out, and they don't understand what they have to begin with. Again, that's my personal feeling on alternative investments, having been in that space for a while. I guess I just don't find that they're necessary for the average person. And, they sound real great, a REIT that's giving an 8% dividend when interest rates are, 0.5%, sounds really good until you put your money in and you can't get your money out. And I've seen that way too many times. So again, it comes down to, if there's that one thing, it's not about the big number, it's about the small number. Right. And I think safety and having access and if something's giving you too big of a return, you got to take a step back and ask why. So, and again, bottom line is 10%. That's it. Because if you lose 10%, it's not going to kill you. But I would never put more than 10%. We're prohibited from doing it. But I think that's a great number. I'd never put more than 10% in any alternative, in total in my portfolio, in alternatives.
Okay, thanks.
Pleasure.
Dick, I think you were up next.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dave. It's been very informative. I have a question. I happen to am curious about some of these funds or companies now that are very much into social justice, environmental sustainability issues. I mean, that's a real attraction to me, because I really think, if not us, I think the next generation, and certainly if they're hopefully still around, knock on wood, the grandkids will be looking more and more into that. I think many of us own companies that we kind of question their, obviously they're very good at making a profit, but they might be in an industry like fossil fuel that we really have questions about. And I think our kids are going to be taking a closer look maybe than we do. I was just wondering what you're thinking about some of these funds that have now developed.
Wow, that is this is the debate that could rage all day. I guess I would say I am not okay. Let me back up. I understand what you're saying. Okay. However, I'm not a fan of ESG investing for a few reasons. Number one is everybody's definition, and you just said it, everybody's definition is different. So you mentioned fossil fuel companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, we can get into the debate about what are they doing and what can we do and all that stuff and climate change and blah, the whole thing. But let's keep that aside and look at it from an investment standpoint. So the problem with ESG investing is fossil fuels are bad for you, right? You just mentioned them. Well, it could be 10 other things that somebody else says, and this person says this and this person says that. I still come back to the same thing. Why are you investing? Okay. Now, if you're, Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or whoever, and you have an unlimited amount of money and you can afford to screw up, right, and do things and be philanthropic and be all this, then it's a different equation. For the vast majority of us, though, we're investing. Why? We're investing to make a return so that money can be used for our life, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So the question I have for you, and the way to look at this is, are you willing to accept a potentially lower return to say, I'm doing good, right? Now, trust me, I'm not belittling, because I feel very strongly about a lot of these topics. But what I say to people is, okay, if you don't want to invest in fossil fuel companies, then don't, right? We do portfolios for people that will say, well, for two reasons. One is we have people who are restricted from buying certain companies and certain industries. I have a client that works for the Fed, right? So he can't buy banks. He's a bank examiner. That would be a problem, right? So he can't buy banks and a bunch of other stuff. We have other people who don't want to own oil. That's one. People that don't want to own other things. We can do that, and any decent advisor who has access can do those type of portfolios for you. What I try to tell people is, you know what? How about instead of doing this thing which doesn't have a real good definition, even because remember, ESG, the G is the governance, and that's when it gets into a bunch of other things like what one person says is good, another person says isn't. So it's like a black hole. How about you get your portfolio to do with few exceptions. If you don't like tobacco, you don't like fossil fuel, maybe you don't like guns or something like that. Well, you don't buy those, right? You put you in other things. But then you still have a portfolio that's designed to make you money. And then you take money you're making and do good with that, right? Then you go out, and if you feel strongly about this, donate some money to those causes, go get involved in your retirement, do those things, but make money. Don't make less money because, this is like the latest wave of, things to invest in. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Sure.
Looks like we got one more hand raised and then a couple of questions in the chat. Myron, you're up.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to know what the real situation is with the fiduciary firm and a non-fiduciary firm. I've had both. The financial fees are different in a way, but they both seem the same to me. Thank you.
Sure. Well, the SEC and FINRA are trying to close the gap, but basically, as an investment advisor, and they're the only ones that by regulation are fiduciaries start to finish. A fiduciary, and again, this is what the rule says. Not all people who say they're, who have to be a fiduciary actually do these things. As a fiduciary, I work for you. I don't work for a company. I don't have quotas. I don't have conflicts of interest. And if I do, they have to be reported. Okay. So there's nobody telling me what to sell you. Now, if you're working with, so that's under the advisory as an investment advisor. Okay. If you go to the old non-fiduciary, which would be, we used to call them stockbrokers, now they're registered representatives that charge you a commission. They work for the company that they work for. Their duty and loyalty, their care, custody, all that stuff is with the company that they work for. So these are the guys that, you've seen all the movies that the company sells them, tells them that we need to move so many shares of a stock today, you may be getting a call to buy that stock because they do not need to act as a fiduciary. They do not need to act in your best interest. Okay. Where that changes now is if you're dealing with retirement money, if you're moving somebody's 401k, rolling an IRA, everybody's supposed to act as a fiduciary. But I think that it's still, I don't understand. I mean, this is just me, but I don't understand who somebody who's not a fiduciary can all of a sudden act as a fiduciary when they've got all these other things. You still have a company telling you what to sell, but now just because I fill out a form, they call them, the prohibited transactions exemptions, PTEs. And if you work with somebody, you'll sign a form that has that on it. It says that, okay, because I'm telling you that of all these things, I'm giving you this big long document that lists all the conflicts of interest, that now I can do this, and by that I'm acting as a fiduciary. I don't think they are. Okay, I don't understand how, for instance, a life insurance guy who's just licensed to sell life insurance can sell you an annuity, and how they can act in any way. They can act as a fiduciary, even though under these new rules they're supposed to, but they can't because they only have one product to sell you. So how could they be acting in your best interest if they can't do a whole spectrum of things? So it does matter. It really does. Unfortunately, in this business, there's still a lot of bad actors that, in the book, I go into the different, even inside of investment advisors, there's a whole range of people who act as investment advisors, but have different business models. One of the most important things to do is to understand that, so that you actually are working with a person, not just by name, right? Not a financial advisor, that doesn't mean anything. A wealth manager, that doesn't mean anything. You're actually working with somebody whose business model is what you need, right? If you need financial planning and you go to a guy who only wants to build portfolios, and maybe he'll do some, quick and dirty financial planning, that's not going to help you, because all he wants to do is build portfolios. He's still a fiduciary, right? So it's more important. Fiduciary is important. It's more important to find that advisor who matches exactly what you need. Like, you don't go to a cardiologist if your ankle hurts. Or maybe you do, but, if you have a twisted ankle or something, you go to an orthopedist, and, the cardiologist isn't going to help you much. Hope that helps.
Well, thank you.
Certainly.
Lee, you had a question about returns. We'll make that the last question. So if you're still.
Yeah, I thought I typed out my question. We've had excuse the phrase, we've had a Bidenomics of a time for the last almost 2 years in the equities and the bond markets. Mm-hmm. So people using advisors and planners or on their own may have had a red line on most of their accounts. Sure. And some might have done well on individual purchases, but by and large, given your experience in the industry, where's the average portfolio invested for a retired person through the advice of a CFP fiduciary standing in the last year and a half?
First of all, wait, let me just follow up on that. Don't get wrapped up in CFP. CFP is a marketing organization.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that these are the initials that are used to promote, safety.
That's the problem. That right there is the problem. So you were talking about fiduciary.
It's promotional. I'm just trying to get the concept. Some people have lost 20% overall. Some people have lost 50. Some have gained 20. What's the average we should look at and say, oh, that's average?
I mean, that's impossible to answer that question because everybody, again, if you go back to the basics, it's, what's your risk capacity? What's your risk needed? What are you invested in? I mean, we've done, I tend to look at things in, the way I run my business is I'm always running it based on the planning. That's first. If I don't need to take risk, I'm not going to take risk in a portfolio or undue risk. So we're always looking at that small number. So when we made outsized returns last year, okay, and everybody was like, again, it was the story of the guy who has Tesla and Bitcoin and he, held it into the end of the year and he wouldn't take anything off the table. Well, as for my clients, knowing where they were and looking at it from a planning standpoint, knowing that I had a year which basically from a return standpoint gave us 3 or 4 years worth of return, right? If you follow that logic. 4 years of what we needed based on a planning standpoint. So fourth quarter last year, we started pumping the brakes on all the portfolios. Now, these are portfolios that went everywhere from, moderately conservative all the way up to aggressive portfolios. And we started pumping the brakes. One of the things that we can do that most people can't do on their own is we moved more money into tactical managers. So whether it was on the fixed income side or on the equity side, where these managers, instead of, think of it as if you're in a Vanguard S&P 500 fund, you can only be invested in the money's going to be invested in the Vanguard, in the S&P 500 and cash. That's it. And cash is, they have a formula that says we need so much cash and that's what we're going to keep. So they can only do one thing, right? They can't go out and buy bonds. They can't go out and buy currency or alternatives or anything else. They can only buy the S&P 500. A tactical manager, depending on the manager and what they're doing, has a range of things that they can do. So they can go from all equities to, let's say, cash. In the fixed income side, they can go from cash or treasuries up to high yield. And we moved more money into these managers so that they were actually able to manage the risk for the portfolios. What that did is I think that, even at the height of it, and this is my philosophy, our worst performing portfolios were probably down about 15%, the more aggressive portfolios at the max when the market was down, close to 30, the NASDAQ. But that's the way I manage things. I don't look at maximizing upside. I look at risk-adjusted returns. So that means that you're going to make, if the market's up, let's say the market's up 20%. Well, maybe you're not going to make 20. You make a little less than that. But when the market's down 30%, I don't want to be down 30% because I think that's a lot harder for people to understand. So average returns, I don't think there's any way of saying what's a good return or what's a bad return. It really depends on your situation and what you're investing in. But that's important to know. One quick one, normally what I always start these presentations with, when I can actually sit there and talk to people, and we haven't had a horrible year. For the last 10 years, the market's been great. So you go into a presentation, you say, hey, how's everybody doing in the market this year? And there's always that guy in the front of the room. You all know who he is. But there's always the guy who's going to be the loud one. He's like, oh, I'm doing great. I'm just not going to cover off the ball. And then I'll look at him and I'll say, how do you know? And I get this blank look because, most people know they're doing well because they look at one statement and they look at the other one and they made money. They don't know how much. They don't know what the percentage is. They don't know anything. But the biggest thing is they don't know how much risk they've taken. So if the S&P is up 10% and you made 8%, is that good or bad? Depends. If you're in a diversified portfolio, I'd say that's probably pretty good. But if you're in an aggressive portfolio where you've got a lot of high flyers and you're underperforming the S&P, I'm like, that's horrible. So you're underperforming something and you're taking more risk. That's not where you want to be. So I hope that helps.
Dave, thank you much. They were great questions. We owe you breakfast. So you are more than welcome to come to any of our meetings. Grab your lox and bagels. I know you're far away, but I would like to offer you a membership in the men's club for the next year. If we have any more of these virtuals, feel free to join us. And really, really appreciate your flexibility.
An hour's not
coming online.
Drive. An hour's not too far to drive for some good bagel and lox. So.
Thanks, Dave.
That we can get you.
I'll take you up on that. And if it's okay, what I'll do is, David, if I could send you some of the information, get that. Seems like everybody's, a lot of the guys are interested in bonds. I have something, a little piece from one of our bond managers that explains how these things work and the individual bonds. I think would be good if we could get it, if you could get it out to people.
Yes, I will.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Perfect. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Good day.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Thanks, Dave. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Mike, you've got some potential new members you would like to introduce.
Yes, this morning, Rich Moskowitz and I went to the JCC in case we had members who hadn't seen the last-minute email about the change. And we encountered three fellas, Ira Eisenstein, Mike Bass, and Victor Sorid, who said they were coming and wanted to be members. And they shot back home and got online. So they're all online now, and I'd ask each of them just to say something. Vic, would you start it off?
Yeah, I was a member years ago, up until about 16 years ago, and for the last 16 years, I have not been a member. I still remember the good times I had bowling with Mike and some of the other guys as well, and we would play against other men's clubs and other synagogues and stuff like that, and we had moderate success. So I'm looking forward to coming back and becoming a member of the men's club. Thank you.
And since you mentioned my name, there's another Mike wannabe, Mike Bass. Mike.
Hi, I've never been a member of the men's club, mainly because I was working full time up until about a year ago, and I'm just over the last year settling into some what I'm going to fill my free time with, which I've done with some volunteer work. So I am interested. I think Rich has my email address because he forwarded me the Zoom link this morning. So if somebody wants to forward me information on joining, happy to look at it. I am the steering committee chair for the Rob Goodwin Holocaust Education Center, which is one reason I'm here this morning. So that is kind of taking up a lot of my time at the moment, but there's always a little bit of free time I can squeeze other things in. Thank you for
I don't know if you're aware of it, Mike, but the reason that the museum is where it is you're looking at guys here who actually transported it from Gratz College to the JCC.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, great. Great to know.
Ira, thank you, Mike. Ira, you're on. I'm sure Ira would be pretty much saying what the others said, and we'll try another time. Okay, back to you, Phil.
Excellent, thank you, and welcome. All I apologize that we're not at the JCC this morning. All of their meetings were canceled, so things happen. But we will see you next month in person. Let's see, Don, you wanted to talk about fantasy football?
Yes, and in particular for the new members that aren't aware of it. I started a league. It's, I think, 9 years old now, and I serve as the commissioner. It's the South Jersey Men's Club Fantasy Football League. We're in our 12th week of a 17-week season. Surprisingly, 11 of the 12 teams that are in it are still in the hunt for the playoffs. So it's exciting. It's fun. We have 26 people involved with the league. And if you're interested in getting involved, you can invite your kids, wives, girlfriends, neighbors, relatives. They could all participate in it because you could have up to 4 owners per team. And to follow up with our guest speaker, if you want to try to enhance your retirement fund by winning the fantasy football, I'm sure you could do that as well. Just don't expect real big returns. But and if anybody's interested, especially the new members, just give me a call. My number is 856-264-7783. And I can even get you involved with a team this year so you can learn the ropes for next year. Back to Phil.
Good deal. Thanks, Don.
This is Bill Roth's funeral tomorrow at 10:15 at Platt. So anybody, I guess it's going to be a nice crowd there. So please be, if you can, please be there. Second, Man of the Year. Man of the Year registrations are due Wednesday. So please give Stan the money or send a check. I don't know if it's going to be Stan. Stan, I mailed you the check the other day because we thought we're not going to be there. So I don't know how many people were sending the check.
If the people don't have the money in, it doesn't matter right now. If they at least give me an email or something, giving me the name, and I'll make sure we get the payment in for them even before we get the check from the members.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So, but just have them send me their names, and then so I know what people like I can sign up that are going.
Yeah, it's $45, right? I mean,
each member $45.
The club is covering half of that, so the club is putting $45 for each one of us.
You can also do that online, Abe. You can also make your donation and registration online. Stan, I hope you got mine.
Okay.
And the last thing I want to mention is the Christmas luncheon. It's going to be in the Voorhees Diner, December 25th, Sunday at 12:30. So please, we'll send out a notice, but let me please RSVP so I can tell the diner how many people are going to be there. It's going to be separate checks, so you don't have to put any money up front. And so again, RSVP to me, but I'll send information in the mail too.
Abe, I think you might want to add to that this is one of the activities that the members will bring their spouses to.
Right. This is the spouses have always been there, so that makes it good.
It's a cheap date, folks. Cheap date.
Yeah.
I got a question. I know it's in an email, so probably been in a couple, but when exactly is the Man of the Year? What is that date? Anybody have it? I'd like to.
December 11th.
Okay.
We haven't mentioned it, but it's Man of the Year for the Middle Atlantic region of the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs that we're a member of. It's an international organization, and it's going to be held who remembers where the place is that's going to be held? Is that in the one in Drescher?
I think so.
A synagogue in Drescher, but we'll carpool it, so you don't have to worry about directions.
Maybe we could send out the announcement again. And thank you for giving me the honor to be the Man of the Year.
Oh, it's you, Nelson, getting it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. You didn't even know it.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
We should get the announcement out to the general membership. I think the board knows about it. And again, thank you.
Yeah,
and the picture was touched up, and a couple people asked me, so it was touched up. I appreciate that.
Something to keep in mind about that is we don't submit an awardee to the region every year. Yet there's some men's clubs that every single year, I think it's 25, 30 years old, maybe. So pretty soon, it's like the janitor's next door neighbor at the synagogue is the guy who's going to be awarded because everybody's getting an award for almost nothing. We only do it when it's well-deserved, and Nelson Mellitz very much deserves the award this year.
Not to knock janitors. They deserve awards too.
Sometimes.
That's Sunday.
Well, Abe, you covered the last three items that I had on my agenda. Are there any other anything else you want to add? Any good and welfare that you'd like to share? Anybody have something of interest that's coming up? We've got 4 minutes left. Unmute yourself there. If not, everybody gets 4 extra minutes back in their morning.
I just want to mention Larry Klee. He's a member, and I know he's in the hospital in Maryland. Wish him well.
Hey, Phil, I was wondering whether we're doing men's club shirts tomorrow at the funeral.
Oh, yeah.
I am not able to make it to the funeral, but I mean that's always a good idea in my mind. Anytime you can.
Yeah, I think that might be a nice showing.
Show support.
Shirts.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd like to add, my son works at Platts, and he said that they're expecting almost an overflow crowd. So get there earlier as opposed to later if you want a parking space.
Like 10 o'clock, I guess.
I'll wear a sport jacket on top of my blue shirt.
What a guy.
Wear pants too, will you, Abe?
Yeah.
Right. Who wants to see my shorts? I can show you my shorts right now.
It's okay.
We all know Bill Roth was fantastic. He's the person that always wanted to go to the hospital to visit people that were in there. And that's not an easy thing to do. He always showed up at funerals. Let's really honor him as much as possible.
Bill Roth, yeah.
Yeah, Bill Roth. Fantastic person.
I'm gonna miss that booming voice.
You always knew when he was in the room, didn't you?
For sure.
I think
Well,
one of his
very
sons is going to mention something about his voice too, because I gave him a couple clues about that.
Bill also was full of surprises. He would pull two blue shirts out of his bag at every meeting he attended. One was for the men's club and one was for the Jewish war veterans. And he was really funny when he mixed them up.
And boy, he could really drink coffee.
Yeah, big containers.
There's just a couple stories that are related to Shivas that we can't talk about here because it's not polite, but he'd eat quite a bit. Let's put it that way.
He likes food.
He's the only guy I ever knew who would put, you know, when you go to a Shiva, there's usually a table or something with the food for people. He actually pulled a chair up to the table and started. I'll say this: it was a person with great integrity who would not bend if he thought something was wrong.
Yeah,
he let you know about it. It was a good man. He was the commander for the local Jewish war vets post, and. Somebody said, I'm scared if I've ever thought that this guy would raise his voice as loud as he could, that windows would shatter.
Yeah.
He really had a stage whisper.
Thank you all very much. Again, I apologize for the Zoom, but next month, we'll be back in person.
As long as the pipes don't burst.
Everybody, have
All
a
right.
wonderful
Have
day.
a good one.
You too.
Avita Zan. Go Eagles.
Yeah.